How to overthrow the government in Minecraft. In all countries, the government really just is the tip of the iceberg of the power structure. The bulk of the power structure is in the establishment, which the government is the part of. The stability of the establishment determines how stable the government is. Successful bottom up revolutions, for the most part, don't happen. Revolutions and radical government changes occur when the establishment becomes unstable. Revolutions and civil wars in Russia, the United States, Britain, and France were never birthed in the peasant or working classes. It always started in the establishment, and then the populace was eventually invited to join in some form or another. If a person desires a radical change of government in Minecraft, is their only choice to wait for the establishment to crack? There are alternatives, but to understand how these alternatives can work, first, one needs to understand how the establishment fits together. And then we will look at some ways the establishment can fall apart. The American federal government was designed with the idea of putting power in the hands of the establishment and creating an anemic democracy element as a pressure relief valve. Madison believed that the interests, what we would call special interests, would be kept at bay by the nature of how each state was very different from each other, and that only very limited ideas of national nature would have the strength to influence government, while most interests would stay small and not be able to organize across state lines. Most countries in the era of the US founding had the church as a major component of their establishment. The factionalized nature of religion in the US prevented religion from filling this role, specifically in the US. The primary foundation of the US government would end up being made of the people and industries with great wealth, the existing political class, and the American university system. Specifically, the university system and politicians creates a feedback loop where the universities provided the educated class to become politicians, while the political class would eventually retire to the colleges to influence the curriculum of the next generation. This was and remains the foundation of the US establishment. Change the colleges and you change the political class. Churches, the Freemason lodges, drinking establishments, and the militia systems were critical adjunct organizations for the establishment of the time. This is where politicians could interact with the limited voting pool, as well as finding manpower for political activities. Without these organizations, the Revolution, the Constitution, and the organizing of the Democratic Republicans in opposition to the Federalist Party would have failed. Newspapers were also important, but initially were the direct mouthpieces of the political movements of the time. The first big addition to the establishment following the creation of the federal government was the National Bank. Hamilton created this entity to unify Revolutionary War debt as a vehicle to create lines of power from the federal government to the states. It became a place of intrigue as those who were close to that bank could secure better deals and also were able to find out inside information. Between 1800 to roughly 1820, a new adjunct support system to the establishment was the rising federal bureaucracy. In this time period, they weren't as much a part of the establishment as they were a support system for it. A second item that occurred was the end of the dominance of the Freemason and their lodge system, which is a long story unto itself. But suffice to say, it lost a lot of power rapidly in that time period. Now, the first successful attempt to alter the establishment was the Jacksonian movement. Andrew Jackson did not begin this movement, but it did thrust him into office, and he implemented many of its goals. During the 1820s, the establishment was becoming very distant and disdainful of the population. The Jacksonian movement sought several methods to disrupt the power of the establishment. First, it pushed the expansion of male suffrage in order to dilute the voting power of the establishment. This meant allowing all adult free males to vote regardless of property or tax status. The second item they worked on was to break up the bureaucracy by increasing the number of people the president could replace. And this ended up becoming known eventually as the spoils system. The final item of the Jacksonian Revolution was eliminating the central bank. Succeeded at. The Jacksonian Revolution ended up creating two major establishment factions. Those who favored a diminished establishment and a strong electorate versus those who thought the establishment should not have to bow to the whim of the voter. These would end up manifesting themselves to the eye as the Democratic Party and the Whig Party. Ultimately, Jackson succeeded in altering the establishment's attitude, where the establishment saw that in order to prosper, they realized the common man also needed to have improved standards of living. Over the next 30 years, the establishment would drift into sectional factions based on North and South. This establishment was not dynamic. This had some pluses and minuses. On one hand, they had great difficulty forcing change on the populace that the populace wasn't interested in. But on the other hand, the establishment could not respond to changing situations. The nature of the northern populace would dramatically change during this period due to industrialization and immigration. This change in northern populace would put them very much out of sync with the establishment. Minorities within the establishment reached out to the populace, and a myriad of political movements formed, most notably the Free Soil Party, the Liberty Party, and several others, that would eventually coalesce with remnants of the Whig Party to form the new Republican Party. So I'm going to go ahead and break here and continue at a later date. In the comment section below, how much do you know about the Jacksonian Revolution? What are your impressions of it? There's kind of a mixed bag in terms of how a lot of historians look at it, because on one hand, he favored democratization, which is supposedly what most modern people in the left want, but at the same time, he attacked a lot of the establishment functions that they're actually in love with, that being the bureaucracy in a central bank. Please smash the like button. If you've been brought to this video by the YouTube algorithm and not a regular subscriber, look at my other titles, consider subscribing, and of course, if you know someone who might find this interesting, please share it with them. Thank you for spending time with me this evening. Hope to see you again in a future video.